Welcome back, everyone. Go ahead and dim the lights, maybe lean in a little closer, because today we're venturing into some of the darkest corners of existence. We're unpacking a source text that is as utterly fascinating as it is, well, completely terrifying. We're going to peel back the fragile little layers of our reality to see exactly what's lurking underneath, in a place known as the Infernal Threshold. So today's explainer isn't just your standard breakdown, it's a full-on descent into cosmic and psychological horror. I come here to eat all your memories, right? Just let that sink in for a second. Imagine waking up in the dead of night, paralyzed by the feeling of an unseen presence in the room, and hearing those exact words echoing in the dark theater of your own mind. This deeply chilling declaration comes straight from an alien creature in our source material, and it instantly plunges us into this visceral nightmare. We're not talking about a monster that wants your flesh, no. It's a predator that feeds on the absolute very fabric of who you are.
Which naturally brings us to a deeply unsettling question. What really happens when your consciousness ebbs? I actually want you to think about this tonight when your head finally hits the pillow. When your waking defenses power down and you slip into a lower state of consciousness, whether you're falling asleep, staring blankly at a wall out of sheer boredom, or even drifting into a coma, what rushes in to fill that void? Because as our source material suggests, you aren't just resting. You might literally be setting the table for a feast.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, the Gates of Madness.
To understand how the door to this nightmare was wrenched open in the first place, we have to look at our first subject from the text, which is a human wizard. Now, normally you might think of a wizard as someone wise, right? But this guy made a catastrophic, reality-breaking mistake born out of pure, unadulterated greed. He didn't just cast a bad spell. He attempted to rewrite the foundational rules of the universe by manipulating something called qualia. So qualia is basically the subjective, internal, conscious experience of reality. You know, the crisp taste of an apple or that sudden, icy feeling of dread in your gut. Well, this doomed wizard attempted to merge the psychological with the physical on a massive macroscopic scale. He wanted a world where our inner psychological symbols didn't just represent physical reality, but literally became indistinguishable from it. And the result? He ended up trapping himself in an infernal never region where the physical world around him is just a terrifying, inescapable manifestation of his own broken psyche.
And what's truly horrific here is that he's now trapped in a prison of eternal, chaotic determinism, and he literally has no one to blame but himself. This wasn't some random, cruel act of nature. I mean, this wizard had a near-perfect life. He was incredibly powerful, even capable of transmuting and reviving the dead. But his own hubris, his arrogant obsession to force this bizarre convocation between mind and matter, it ruined him forever. So now he's stuck in the dark, endlessly asking why, just completely on the verge of giving up.
Section 2. Feasting on your memories.
Because while that wizard sits there trapped in his own hubris, there are other entities out there. Entities that actively prey upon us the second our psychological defenses drop. Returning to the alien creature we met at the very beginning of this explainer, let's take a look at its neurochemical diet. And honestly, the sheer scope of its hunger is just staggering. It doesn't just want your happiest moments or your absolute worst traumas. It feeds on the existential fabric of your neurons. Whether it's a hazy, blood-soaked memory, a completely blank slate moment of utter monotony, or even just some random, inconsequential event from decades ago, turns out, to them, your awkward middle school memories are an absolute delicacy. It's all nourishment. When our consciousness degenerates, there's this sort of psychological gravity that pulls us below the threshold, and these creatures are just there, insistently waiting to devour all that we are, eternally.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the insanely methodical nature of the mind destruction. Enter the ninja, an entity that functions purely in the shadows. Just look at the steps here. First, they seep underneath the floorboards of consciousness. They whisper little lies, pretending they're doing absolutely nothing. Second, they bind and constrain the mind early. Timing is absolutely everything for them. They have to strike optimally before the mind can even mount a defense. And finally, step 3, they annihilate the future. They inject this artificial sociological inferno directly into our consciousness, destroying futures simply because they can. It is cold, it's frigid, and it's mesmerizingly cruel.
Moving on to Section 3, the Blind Soldier's War.
So let's shift gears here from the destruction of the mind to straight-up existential body horror. We are now traversing the eerie, nostalgic plains of Sui alongside an alien soldier. This entity was dispatched to the front lines of a mighty war, sent by its elected officials to fight a supposedly terrifying enemy. But the battlefield? Oh, it's far more gruesome than any standard war zone. Just look at this comparison. It is the ultimate bait and switch. The clinical rhetoric of their elected leaders promised a very specific threat, faceless, terrifying unknowables from outer space, monsters that besiege the psyche. But the actual reality on the plains of Sui? It was an endless, sickening realm consisting of nothing but mirrors. The grievous others they were sent to fight were merely their own reflections.
Our own projectiles were reflected back at us. This right here is the horrifying twist. These soldiers, thrust into this dystopic nightmare of their own making, well, they had no eyes. They were entirely blind. Fighting a war in a realm of mirrors, they fired an absolute conviction that an actual enemy opposed them. But because they lacked the senses to actually decipher reality, their own offensives just bounced back. They literally destroyed themselves, victims of their own internal biochemistry and a myriad of cognitive errors. Just dying by their own hand, in the dark.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Cosmic Judgment.
We have to face the ultimate reckoning now. We turn our attention to the Hornet monster, a being that buzzes through the chaos of existence and looks down upon humanity with a terrifying, piercing clarity. The Hornet offers a pretty damning perspective, directly comparing insect eusociality with human psychopathy. See, it views its own kind as multidimensional, capable of universally cooperative, emergent life, like a true superorganism. In stark contrast, it looks at us humans as barely one-dimensional. We're just creatures glued to the land by gravity, completely chained by biological determinism. For all our big talk about free will, the Hornet argues that we are entirely suffocated by determinism, and our rampant cognitive dissonance entirely prevents any true cooperation.
And this brilliantly illustrates the Hornet's taxonomy of life. Think about it. Parasites exploit the host until isolated destruction. Social insects, on the other hand, use cooperative quantity to achieve collective survival. And then there's us, humans. Our primary characteristic? Cultivated apathy. And the ultimate outcome? A sociological, everlasting inferno. The Hornet monster sees right through us, guys. It notes that we desperately try to use rationality to mask our raw, random, dumb luck savagery.
Who cares if a few die or neglected or hurt sufficiently until broken, as long as most do not? That is the absolute core of human psychopathy, according to the text. To these cosmic monsters, we are the terrifying ones. We build our entire societies on a foundation of apathy, casually writing off the broken and the dead as acceptable losses. The Hornet views our great towering civilizations as just an artifice, no inherently better than the cathedrals built by termites.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today, leaving us with one solitary, unadorned question to mull over. Are we the true architects of this infernal threshold? The monsters in the dark, the wizards trapped in madness, the blind soldiers destroying themselves. Perhaps they're all merely reflections in our own endless realm of mirrors. Kind of a chilling thought to leave you with, right? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and until next time, keep your eyes open.